Hello, friends. This is the founder of the Hello Kitty Militia from the Facebook page. Anyway, what I'm going to tell you about today is we've been hearing for quite some time through various movies and book publications and novels and documentary experts talking about one way they could very well take over the United States. Sneak attack. We've all heard about the cyber attack. Well, in the remake of the movie Red Dawn, which was just put out a couple years ago, well, that's exactly what happened. The EMP completely wiped out the grid. There was a movie on the National Geographic put out. It was called American Blackout. EMP wiped out the grid. And it gave a scenario of what could very possibly happen, what life could be like in America for those who didn't prepare if all the electricity went out, because we've been so dependent on electricity. Those of us who were born within the last 100 or so years, we were born into this. Electricity is just a flip of a switch. Well, so this scenario about an EMP blowing out the grid, that's nothing new. And nothing new, and I can prove it. This is now 2014. January 17th of 2014 to be exact. Here's a movie, if you can find it. It was a mini-series back in 1986. Called America, spelled with a K. There's the back of it. There was a book by the same title, America, spelled with a K. Now, they put something in the book that they did not put in that miniseries. You can watch the miniseries on YouTube. Trying to find it on Amazon, good luck. Several years ago, I bought that for $100. I've seen it go as much as for $500. There's this book here, 1 second after, talking about the grid going out. Various books, movies, they talk about EMP, the grid going out. And as I said, it's not nothing new. Why? The movie was made back in 1986. They didn't show it in the movie. But I'm going to read to you from this book, America, spelled with a K, by the same name. Remind you, this was written back in 1986. I'm going to read you majority of the prologue, providing I have time. In the history of human folly, arrogant fantasies of military supremacy and pathetic illusions of national safety have played a crucial role. The Great Wall of China, the Spanish Armada, the Maginot Line, all were thought to be impregnable. All fell. And with them fell not only governments but ideals, not only nations but those unique aspects of the human spirit that were embodied in each conquered civilization. Through most of the 1980s, the United States of America had regarded itself and was regarded by the rest of the world as the mightiest and therefore most secure nation the world has ever seen. It seemed to dawn on no one that those two notions did not necessarily go hand in hand. The American defense system represented the perfect combination of American skill and American will, of vast wealth and limitless ingenuity applied to the problems of survival for this hardiest of peoples. In fact, the U.S. military had evolved the most sophisticated weaponry and communications networks ever known to man. With that sophistication, however, came a vast complexity, and with that complexity came danger. The taller a building gets, the more it sways in the wind. The longer a bridge, the less it takes to send the whole span crashing. So it was with the American system of defense. Paradoxically, as the system grew more powerful, it grew more fragile. As it took on more and more weight and bulk, it came ever closer to teetering. Some few men and women, both inside the government and out, were aware of this. As in ages past, their voices were not heard. As these voices of caution were ignored in Washington, sound familiar? However, voices of opportunity were listened to closely in Moscow. In the waning days of the 1980s, the leaders of the Soviet Union, beset by paralyzing economic woes and growing domestic unrest, had less to lose than to gain by gambling on a massive rearrangement of the balance of power in the world. Without warning, on a quiet Tuesday morning, the Russians took the headiest gamble in the history of warfare by launching a nuclear attack against America. But this attack was no storybook Armageddon of mushroom clowns bursting over cities, of scalded millions murdered in their homes. This was a new sort of war, conceived in shocking simplicity by Soviet scientists. The premises? Don't attack targets. Attacking targets, after all, even with nuclear missiles, was essentially as primitive as throwing stones. What mattered was not the individual bases or silos, but rather the electronic network that linked them as an effective whole. The key then was to attack and disable the communication systems among the targets, thereby crippling the entire system. High in the stratosphere above America, 4 enormous nuclear devices were detonated. On Earth, the explosions were heard only as a low rumble. No one was hurt in the blast, nor did they generate a dangerous amount of fallout. No one even felt the concussive power of the bombs. But the explosions were felt by every computer circuit, every telephone line, every banking system, and every electrical plant from Maine to San Diego. The detonations created a vast electromagnetic pulse, EMP. That was like 100,000 bursts of lightning focused insidiously on America's nervous system. Vast stores of computer memory were instantly erased. The coils of electric generators sizzled and seized. Telephones went dead. The age of communication ended in a millisecond, and with it ended America's military, political, and economic hegemony. The conquest of America, incredibly, had been effected without taking a single life. American missiles stood unarmed in their silos, but could not be activated around the world. American forces, their ranks undiminished, were at the ready, but could not be issued orders. In Washington, D.C., the American president was given an agonizing and humiliating choice: surrender and agree to unilateral disarmament, the virtual destruction of the dollar, and the essential end of national sovereignty, or resist. Fight back with whatever sundered forces could be mustered and face certain annihilation. This choice was not a choice at all for a leader who valued human life. With dizzying, incomprehensible sadness, the United States of America was under the thrall of the Russians. With Soviet rule came a dizzying torrent of euphemisms and doublespeak. The conquest, by far, the most cataclysmic and humiliating event in all of American history, was dubbed the transition, as if the shift from capitalism and freedom to communism and subjugation was indeed an inevitable progression. Thousands of loyal citizens were redefined as subversives and forced to leave the cities where, in concentration, they could be troublesome to the new authorities. They were called exiles, and it was true that their homeland had abandoned them. The most committed of the exiles became resistors and guerrilla fighters, who endured the most crushing hardships and dangers in the name of those values that only yesterday had been the norm. Under the system of the conquerors, logic was stood on its head and language itself recruited into the service of erasing history. But those who were these Soviets, who were now America's administrators, overseers, bosses, who were these guys? Oddly, they did not conform at all closely to our hysterical Cold War image of them. They were not beetle-browed commissars, nor were they blistering bores who swilled vodka and spouted rigid ideological platitudes. They were modern men and women, cultured, pragmatic, efficient, very often charming, and generally humane. They had humor, they had desires, and they had a vision. Their vision was of a world united and running as a single mechanism according to the precepts of Marx and Lenin. To each according to his need, from each according to his ability. On its face, the prescription was benign enough. Could any thinking person claim that the rhetoric was less dignified or lofty or even essential different than the thrilling pronouncements of Jefferson and Lincoln, on which American Republic had been based? The Soviets came not to conquer by force, but to win more total victory by imposing alternate mythology. They were offering peace. It was a sort of peace that the great majority of Americans, all those who wanted nothing more from their time on earth than to preserve some fraction of the security and comfort they'd known before, except with appalling ease. It was a sort of peace against which some few Americans, keeping alive the spark of freedom in its armor of defiance, vowed to wage the most intimate and sacred form of battle. And then there was a few more paragraphs, and it just talks about the main characters of the stories. Anyway, what we've been hearing lately in 2014, 2013, 2012, as the years go back, in recent times, recent administrations, everything some of these old so-called crackpots were saying, and all the arrogant, antagonistic liberals, educated beyond their intelligence and full of themselves, they say we're nothing but crackpots. Oh, that could never happen. We hear it more and more all the time. More and more. We hear about this stuff all the time. It's 2014. This miniseries came out in 1986. We're talking, what, 27 years, 28 years ago? They were talking about everything that was been happening, was going to happen, and they were saying it back then, and even further than that. This book here, George Orwell, 1984. They talked about the surveillance society. That's what we're living in. You're looking at me, and my computer's looking at me. You know? Anyway, this is going to end here in less than 2 minutes, so I got to get. But anyway, I wanted to read that to you. That was from this book called America. You can find it on Amazon for almost nothing. The shipping costs more than the book itself. I hope you folks who listen to me listen well, listen again, listen to it several times, share it with your friends, and please repost this. Let's try and get this viral. If anything, people just need to be prepared for what's coming. Anyway, I'll talk to you again. This is the founder of the Hello Kitty Militia saying ta-ta for now.